everybody. This is a large turnout. This has been a fantastic increase in steady month-over-month participation for the COI meetings. So thank you very much. I think your feedback on what you're interested in seeing has really helped. So again, anytime you guys have an idea of a topic you want us to talk about or find speakers for any of the monthly meetings, you can let us know. Our leadership team is here. You can contact any of us, Jaime, Florence, Julie, Kevin, Nicole, myself, Lisa, or Kayla, or you can use our generic acquisition COI email, which can be found on the website. And Nancy's not on this, but Nancy Dillon OJ does a great job from ACT-IAC, also helping and coordinating for us. Our current projects that we have going on right now is an emerging technologies white paper being created. I think that's in the review stage. So congratulations to the federal sponsor GSA and Jaime. We have 2 active projects going on that we're always looking for volunteers. So if you're interested in learning more about securing the supply chain, which is identifying and providing opportunities to build awareness around supply chain challenges, and we're focusing on tabletop exercises. The COI lead for that is Julie Dixon, and the federal sponsor again is GSA. And our new project, which I think Kevin is going to come talk up a little bit here, is called the Frictionless Federal Acquisition Regulation Project. So Kevin, do you want to take it away?
It's aspirational in nature. Thank you. And we're setting up a group at the request of a couple of federal sponsors. Shauna Weber, who's the Chief Procurement Officer at IRS, is our formal project sponsor, but we have a lot of interest out of OFPP for this project as well. And really what we've been asked to do is to create another forum for industry to provide feedback beyond the feedback channels that currently exist in the Federal Register and through our industry associations and so forth, but an interest group out of ACT-IAC to focus not on the yes or no of FAR rules, but just what could we be doing to craft these rules in ways that might be less burdensome, particularly around issues involving the integrated award environment, SAM and all that, but on any topic. And so we are pulling together a group of volunteers right now who will hopefully join us in monthly calls to review, and we'll start with 1 or 2 rules, and we'll see how much lift we get from the team and see how much we think we can tackle over time. But our objective would be to examine each of these draft rules and really understand what the burden is that's involved by reaching back to our back offices in our respective firms, and we represent small business, medium business, large business, and really give good feedback about how some of these rules will impact the marketplace so that they can be better tailored going forward. I think it's a really impactful case that we've been asked by the government to do to help inform better rulemaking. So looking for volunteers, and we would love to hear from you and have you join and shape this effort.
And there's our COI email there. If you're interested in reaching out to either Kevin directly, me, or this group, will funnel you to the right people. Kevin, you haven't gone on mute yet. Is that all you want to say?
That's great.
Love the smile. Thank you. We also give our monthly plug here for the Acquisition COI weekly digest. So to make sure you don't miss any of the fun and exciting things happening, make sure you sign up for the weekly digest. And here are the instructions on how you do that to make sure that you get weekly or daily updates from the COIs. So today we are here to hear from Jill Ackridge. She currently serves as the Director for Customer Account Management for the Office of Professional Services and Human Capital Categories, PSHC, an office within GSA's Federal Acquisition Service. In this role, Jill oversees all customer engagement activities for PSHC, as well as Federal Acquisition Services Region 10 footprint of Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington State. Jill serves as a co-chair for the FAS Services Experience Committee, a part of GSA's newly established services marketplace. In this capacity, Jill oversees agency-wide efforts to improve user experiences of industry partners and customers of the FAS service offerings. Prior to this current position, Jill served as a program manager for strategic initiatives based on behalf of PSHC, as well as the federal marketplace, and was instrumental in the development and planning of user research activities, IT consolidation plans, and the shaping of fast service offerings. Having interacted with Jill a couple of times now, I know she brings all of this expertise to bear in her work. We are honored and appreciative of her time today. Joining her for support, I guess moral or otherwise, is Bounce Corey, Supplier Relationship Management Specialist for the Professional Services category, also at GSA. And I think now, Jill, you're going to take us away?
Yep, I will hop on in. Thank you so much. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining today. It's a good timing to kind of give you the latest details on what's going on with the new contract. I will say, if you would just want to jump to the next slide, I'll get this elephant out of the room about the name. We're a bit of a back and forth within GSA. I presented to you before saying this was going to be at least temporarily called Next Generation Services IDIQ. If you're looking for the RFI today, as of Friday, it's officially back to BIC-MAC, Best in Class Multiple Award Contract. However, for all of the other questions out there, if you've heard Big Mac, Next Gen IDIQ, Oasis 2, Oasis Next Gen, they're all the same contract. So I want to let people know that now. And I'll even tell you that it's probably not going to be BIC-MAC in a month because our Office of Strategic Communications is supposed to be telling us what to call it in the future. So first, apologies for that confusion. It's confusing for ourselves as well, if it makes you feel any better, though I'm sure it doesn't. But I do want to say that they're all the same contract. We'll talk about, the reason we're struggling with the name is because it is beyond just professional services that we're looking to. So we didn't want to call it Oasis 2. We're not sure if we want to call it BIC-MAC because there's a lot of BIC-MACs out there. Big Mac, well, McDonald's will sue us. So, lots of things to consider as we move forward. And Next Gen might also be a little too related to what you hear for other contracts. So TBD, apologies. But if you hear one, you're hearing them all. The other thing, yeah, the RFI did release today. I think you probably haven't gotten too much of a chance to preview it because it officially came out about a half hour ago. But it does close March 17th. So I hope you'll all take a chance to look through that and answer that RFI. It is in a survey format. So we used Qualtrics. I'm sure if you're all getting used to the MRAS version of how we do RFIs, we wanted to make sure we kept to that as well. But we provide an overview, which I'm pretty much going to walk through today. So you get a little bit of a preview of the RFI. You get a chance to ask clarifying questions. And then hopefully that spares you from reading that 7-page PDF, at least to some extent. And then just the kind of the basics of what this contract will be before I dive into the details is that it is going to be best in class. If our new name choice didn't indicate that, I don't know what would. I mentioned it's going to go beyond professional services. It's going to be vetted open enrollment. So that is the biggest piece that'll be different from how we manage MACs and GWACs today. You're not going to see an on-ramping window that comes out and you have a race to finish and you're trying to make sure you have all of the qualifications by a certain deadline. It will be continuously open. Now, we are trying to decide whether it's always open or if it's open in this quarter or for this month, but it would be open multiple times a year and not just, once in a blue moon when we decided we needed more participation or things like that. The other thing is we're looking, and so far the plan is for small and large contracts to be combined. We haven't really heard enough reason to not do it yet. We've been talking to industry and customer agencies about kind of the implications of that. And we are trying to put in enough tools and resources to make it so that for market research for customers, it's not a concern on their part, and then for all of you so that you have less contracts that you have to manage. And especially for agency or for industry partners who may be teetering between small and large, or in some categories are large, others small, that you don't have that kind of administrative burden of swapping hands. Oh, we're about to get a visitor interruption. Sorry, guys. There we go. Get that cat out of the way. The last piece will be systematic, which is a generic little buzzword we can throw on things, but it means that we're going to try and do this to the greatest extent as like a TurboTax type experience. If you were part of the second round of OASIS on-ramps, we use the tool Symphony. That is the tool we will be using moving forward. But we'll be enhancing some of its capabilities, the data it collects, and turning on capabilities for customers as well. And you'll actually see some of those capabilities get turned on for OASIS. So it'll be like a little bit of a test run. We can work out the tweaks before this contract launches. If you're not on OASIS, you'll still have a preview of what customers would be seeing. And then we can kind of take it from there, but I'll go into some of those capabilities a little more as we move forward. And then I'm going to use the term unpriced because it's less of a mouthful than the full kind of definition of what unpriced authority is, but we're not going to use price as a determination factor for award at the IDIQ level, and instead let competition at the task order level drive pricing decisions from customers. So you don't have to worry about, submitting your labor categories and their rates to us, but we'll talk about a little bit of kind of what data we're hoping to collect and what you'll see on the RFI around that as well as we kind of move through. So those are the quick facts. I suppose I talked a bit longer on them than maybe quick, but that's to give you the groundwork. If you want to jump to the next slide. And this is just why we're doing this. We do want to have a simpler buying experience, reducing friction, as we saw that group standing up is going to be one of the goals of this contract as well. And so a lot of the decisions we're making for the acquisition strategy are to try and help with that, obviously to meet best in class, and then that contract duplication piece. And that's also why we're looking at how do we expand this to other services, because we've gone through MAS consolidation. Is there a potential for MAC consolidation? And can we build something that's flexible enough that could encompass that? To that point, I will say that Polaris is a small business IT contract that you've probably heard about happening, kind of getting planned out right now as well. The plan is that it will still go out as scheduled. So they would launch somewhat simultaneously, so they'd still have that kind of coverage as our strategies with combining with IT are ongoing and in flux. So I don't have really particularly good answers for that. However, we are looking at our other internal MACs, such as our HCAT schedule would get combined, and we're discussing with the building maintenance and operations team about folding them in as well. All right, you want to jump to the next? This is to give you a sense of timeline. Right now we're in contract development. Obviously the RFIs, market research, discussions with industry and customers are all happening this fiscal year. And the solicitation will be out for initial kind of responses from industry all of next fiscal year, so that task orders can begin in FY23, maybe a little early if we're ahead of schedule. That's the general overview. I'll talk a little bit more about kind of what's happening in this FY21 timeframe as well, and what can you expect next now that the RFI is out. So want to move on? Oh, I don't know what happened to the format. I probably, but if we can always send a new version too. But just where we're at is where we're at in bold. RFI is out. And then we're having ongoing conversations with agencies leadership about kind of their level of participation, things they'd like to see in the scope, and how we can continue to involve members of their workforce to build out different types of requirements and criteria that we'd be looking for in our source selection, as well as industry profiles and market research capabilities. So we want to jump. And then when you see this, you'll be able to look at some of the other activities that have been going on. All right, so I'm going to hop in. As I mentioned, I'm kind of giving you a preview of what's on the RFI, and it's so that you know what we're discussing on the RFI, and then I'll close up with what's coming after this RFI. This RFI is focused on acquisition strategy concepts, so it's not going to go into details about individual capabilities, source selection criteria, or anything like that. That would be the second RFI. Or maybe I will talk about that one a little bit to start, just to give that context. That RFI, she just wants my attention. That RFI will ask for industry capabilities so that we can actually use that as a benchmark for source selection criteria. So we won't necessarily immediately say this is what we think the minimums would be or anything like that. We want to get a full sense of the capabilities across industry for the different scope areas before we set that kind of bottom line in a sense. And I just want to say that to kind of level set expectations for what you'll see in the RFI today. But we're looking for your feedback on our ideas, our initial ideas, before we go too far down the line, sort of thing. There is a lynx in my house, yes. She might jump back up again. That's Whiskey, so you can, so you know who's presenting with me. Other things just to consider for kind of today's RFI, and as we move through this, we are like all of these things are concepts. They are in flux. So if feedback shows that we missed the mark, we will come back and we'll say, you know, this is how we've pivoted our assumptions. We do want to build this with both industry and customer agencies in mind, and that is the approach we're going to be taking moving forward. So you'll see a lot of engagement from us, a lot of asks for your input, and even as we start to think through areas of scope that we've never covered before, we might have to come back and say, can you tell us more about how this should look? How should we design this? We're trying to make the future. We're trying to create better data, and we're using this contract to get us there for the world of services. So what you're looking at here is just a sample of contract organization. We're going to organize everything into what we're calling domains. They're different than pools, if you're familiar with OASIS, because instead of having a single NAICS set the size standard and be the ordering NAICS code, we now, well, by the time we launch, we'll have the ability to have any NAICS be an ordering NAICS under a domain. And it'll be at the contracting officer's discretion. But the idea for industry is that you onboard to a domain and you technically qualify for all of those NAICS codes. So regardless of what the customer ordered, if they were ordering under R&D, but they were doing 541714, you're in that R&D fair opportunity group. And that's how it's kind of being set. So you'll also see crossover for NAICS codes because a NAICS code might be applicable to more than one category. So we're going to welcome your input on this structure, as well as some of the thoughts on how you might want to participate. And obviously kind of the thoughts on how this works in a small and large contract combined. The numbers you see up here with the number of vendors are from examples I've used, but by no means are they actual representations of like caps or anything like that. Because that's another big thing is we are not looking at capping this contract. We are going to have it be vetted with minimum qualifications. But if you meet those qualifications, we don't see why you shouldn't be able to participate. So keep that in mind there, and you'll be able to kind of comment to that as well. But any numbers you see in here were made up for the purposes of making examples and nothing more than that. And then there's an example of how, you know, a CO could order from any, but it does solicit that full fair opportunity group. Right now, we're anticipating using category management and subcategories as the main domain names, while adding some specialized domains for areas that aren't neatly addressed by category management. Example I've used is base operations support, counterintelligence, and technically, even within the professional services world, environmental services is not in category management, but that's something that we would call out individually. As you're going through the RFI, if there's things that you would like to suggest be early domain areas for us, please let us know. As well as you could give us feedback that, you know, R&D should be split 3 ways, whatever it might be, and we could talk about why that is. However, I'm going to show you how we're thinking of collecting data and why general might actually be better in the long run. However, if industry doesn't all fit neatly in a group, that's more of what we're interested. Like if the requirements for one type of R&D are so much different that the right industry partners couldn't qualify for the overarching R&D, then that's what we would be focusing on and what changes we might be wanting to make. I think our last thing on there is if you're cut off on my screen, on your screen as well as mine, I use the full breadth of the slides, so apologies there. It's just talking about what's on the RFI. So that's the only text you're missing there, but we'll jump to the next one. And this is the level of detail that we're looking to capture. And that's why I mentioned that general might be okay in the future state. And the reason for that is whatever you submit to us, we're going to make available to customers. We're not doing the black hole approach of you gave it to us, it lives in 5 folders deep within GSA's systems, never to be seen again. You submit a project, that project is visible for customer agencies to search on, read about. You're going to tag it to the different types of experience that it might be relevant to, the different certifications or capabilities, so that it can then get researched by our customers. In the overview, you'll see there's a caveat for if there's a certain level of security clearance that was required. We're certainly not going to share those types of things. However, we'll have to think through if you want to still highlight those capabilities without giving away what you did, that there could be possibility for that as well. So just kind of examples of what you see on here. If you're submitting experience, the idea would be you tag it to maybe kind of the nuanced work within that R&D. So the example I have is medical R&D and R&D with systems IT. That name will probably change, but it was just kind of a quick mock-up for you all to reference. But that would be 2 of many. And the idea is that they're fixed. Fixed in the sense that GSA, with your partnership and with customer agencies, determines the names. However, flexible that we could add more later if something changed. There's a new sort of emerging type of work that people are looking for in R&D, and we want to call out who can do it. And you would get notified that there was something new added. You're in the R&D domain. We're now looking for R&D. We've added R&D with robotic process automation capabilities. And please go in and indicate whether or not you have experience and either provide new experience or map some of your current experience to this if it qualifies. So any experience you give us, whether it's would be shareable across the domain. So you can reuse experience when onboarding to different domains, and you only submit it to us the one time. And we would cross-check it, like if you're maybe adding it to a new one, but we don't have to verify anything that we've already verified on it. And the idea is that we're also going to do, I'm going to answer that question right away, but we're also going to do that for customers. So if we verified it for you, we will pass that on to them at the task order level so that they don't have to check it again. There is a question about what is the name on, thank you, Mike, about what is the name on SAM right now. It is the same name, BICMAC, but with all of the acronyms spelled out. So best in class, multiple award contract, BICMAC.
If you scroll up in the chat, I think there's a link. Bounce has given you the link as well to be able to.
And I wanted to go over kind of those logistics. Bounce is going to help with some general questions. You're welcome to put them in chat as I'm talking, and then we'll have open Q&A in just a few minutes, and then we can bounce there. But if I didn't mean to use his name, but then we can move over to that and start going over kind of that live Q&A. As far as other things to note, you'll see on here, we're considering different ways of capturing your experience relative to certifications, and as well as specific types of experience customer agencies might be interested in for their type of work. So that health mission space would be things that we help define with HHS, DHA, things like that. And we work through other mission space type requirements. USAID has already started the floodgates of all of the different country type information they'd be so curious to know about. So it's things like that that we'll have to think through. Certifications, though, we don't anticipate being hard requirements for domains. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. What we're looking for there is things that you would just include in your profile so that if it is a task order requirement, people can look against it, but it doesn't have to necessarily be tied to a project experience and things like that. However, it might be that, this was a cost type contract that you're providing experience on. So here's my proof of, and here's my approved cost accounting system that I happen to have. Other things that aren't on here that we'll ask about are considerations for capabilities based on complexity and the ability to potentially filter by simultaneous locations, level of number of FTE, and things like that. And so we'll ask you about what you might consider a good filter for complexity. And if there's anything else we should consider and how we might want to tag experience to help customers better understand what you can do. Because ultimately, this is your capability statement made digital, made it so that you don't have to keep reproducing it so that you don't have to keep seeing sources sought RFIs. So I will say you don't have to put everything of your experience into your profile, but think about just highlighting what is your best version of medical R&D that shows the most complex example that you can do, so that when customers are looking for you, if they click everything under the sun, you show up. Or and with that in mind, this is only for market research purposes. So this is not a limiter of fair opportunity, but it is an early preview of what customers are looking for. Yeah, exactly. They are advisory down selects, not enforced. So it is a preview of market research so that they understand who might be able to do this, with the caveat that, you know, it will be actually determined at the task order level. However, it gives you all a sense of what things they're looking for at the task order level. So you have an early preview of, would I even be interested in this? And you don't necessarily have to go read a PWS. You can come in quickly and see, oh, I don't do medical R&D. I don't even need to open this, sort of thing. Likewise, customers have asked that they can use this as sort of their mini RFI. So they come here, they put this in, and they just want to send off a quick question that says, hey, here's my timeline. Probably if they want to include a PWS, and just do for you all to save the sources sought, small business verification headaches, to say, would you bid? Why? Yes or no, and then why or why not? And then they can tell their small business office kind of if there's a viable small business opportunity there, or what kind of the picture of who's available looks like. But we want to try and make it as simple as that for them, with the ultimate goal of starting to convince those small business offices that this might be able to give them that preview of at least market research without even having to do a sources sought RFI. Obviously not trying to take out some of the more complex RFIs that customers need help with, and those sorts of things. So you'll see questions about kind of the types of information, as well as the management of vendor profiles as well in that RFI. So I'm going to jump just for the sake of time. We'll move on. All of this ties into the kind of the source selection and onboarding. And one second. Sorry. So I am, sorry. So this is a preview of basically the same things that you saw on market research, but for you all. I need to stop answering questions on the fly. I have such a bad habit of that. So I want you to keep in mind that these are mock-ups. These don't represent at all of the minimum requirements. I'm putting them up there as potential samples so that you get an idea of what we might be capturing and kind of tagging your experience against. We would spell out what are the minimum requirements, so that as you're adding projects, you can see, am I checking a box? Or is this a project that doesn't check any boxes in R&D? And you can then clearly see what types of examples we are looking for your qualification into R&D, into management and advisory, whatever it might be. And we're also considering and looking into the ability for you to incorporate or import from FPDS, so that we have that kind of track record. You can decide whether FPDS was represented accurately or not, but then it could auto-fill in some of those details for you, and then you put in kind of the rest and some of those other ancillary factors. Again, anything that we're asking for would be for the benefit of customers. And likewise, when we do set minimums, it will be after having conversations with those customer agencies that buy from those domains the most. Of us bringing in, the Air Forces of the world who are buying all of the R&D alongside, the different offices of Army and Health and Human Services, and talking to them about, hey, this is what we're thinking of minimum requirements being. Here's the picture of capabilities that we had from industry. And here's your industry partners relative to what we're looking at. Is this right? Did we set the right standard, or do we need to kind of go back to the drawing field? And you'll see those same same ability to kind of respond to us, like, hey, here's the standard that we've set. We've set it in partnership and based on conversations with both sides of the house. Let us know if we got it right, got it wrong. Let's talk it through before that solicitation hits the street. The other thing is, we are building this to be flexible in the domains that we you probably heard me say we're starting with 9 to 15 domains. That doesn't mean we won't add more later. And that would be based on customer demand and requests. But again, if you had experience in the system that maybe the reason we stood up this new domain is it just needed this 2 little niche things. And it was so niche that we couldn't do it within the current domain because we couldn't get the right industry partners in or something like that. That would be kind of reasons we might stand up additional ones in the future. Or as IDIQs from customer agencies sunset and we managed to roll them into this, or even our own IDIQs, what do those domain spaces look like in the future? So things like that. So you will see questions on the RFI about this methodology, also about the use of subcontractor experience to qualify, as in your experience as a subcontractor, as well as kind of teaming arrangements and some of the thoughts around that and how we might validate or evaluate those teaming and subcontractor experience. As I mentioned before, you won't see questions on specific source selection criteria, minimums or standards just yet. That'll be in that second RFI. All right. Next slide. So a few other things that'll be on here, but I don't have fun visuals for. We will ask about IDIQ pricing, specifically kind of some ideas for collecting pricing data from you, more on the prices paid side of the house, but we're open to kind of opinions on what might be a better way to provide customers with data when they need to make fair and reasonable price determinations. And then of course, you'll have the ability to provide kind of some of the basic input. If you want to tell us that there's something on a current MAC that you do or do not want, or open your ability to give us open feedback, and also to suggest questions or ongoing things that you'd like to learn more about. But hopefully we can maybe answer some of those here in a minute. But we are going to have that in an industry day on April 1st, where we will go through and kind of consolidate all of the questions that have come in, talk about how our assumptions have changed and all of that. So that's the next slide. And so that is the last bit of kind of where we're going now. So that industry day will take place April 1st. From there, we are going to have a second RFI, as I mentioned, on capabilities and source selection criteria. That'll come out in the May timeframe. In the month of April, kind of in between that April and May, we'll likely be doing engagement on some of the scope areas that we need extra help on that are new. Health-based services is one we're already setting up, for example, to get kind of industry's input on how should we define that? What are some things we should consider, capabilities, certifications, those sorts of things in defining the health services domain. And as we get feedback from this RFI on other scope areas we might want to consider, we'll look at what other industry sessions do we need to have with different industry groups about domain spaces that we never even considered. And then you'll continue to get updates from us, but the best way to keep up to date with us is going to be the professional services category Interact community. We are cross-posting the RFI to our facilities and security Interacts as well. So you'll see it in multiple places. The other thing is, if you are a current schedule SIN holder, you are going to get a direct email for the RFI as well. It's kind of how the system is set up for our market research as a service platform. And so you'll have a chance to click on kind of your own personal link, which will also help autofill your company details if you received that and you happen to be the point of contact in our e-library system. So multiple ways that this is going to, that today's RFI is going out. It is on beta SAM. It is going to be, if it isn't already, it will be posted on Interact later today. And you'll see, I'm also going to be sending, if you participate in any of the industry sessions, you'll get a direct email from our PSHC dev email, which is going to be our ongoing point of contact email for this project and contract moving forward. You'll see that at the end of the day as well. So hopefully you don't get hit up too many times if you happen to be the point of contact for all of those, but we do want to make sure you have the chance to respond, have your voice be heard, and then hear from us on kind of our responses to those inquiries at the end of the month, beginning of the next one. All right, I've talked a lot, so let's see what's out there. We can respond to in chat or if people, I guess, is there a raise hand feature? I'm thinking Zoom has it.
We try to control Q&A through the chat so that we can combine questions as they come across. And Jill, you don't have to monitor and do all the work. So thank you very much for being so interactive and doing that. I think, so as people think of questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I do think that the link is in there from Bounce already, and I will copy it again so people don't have to scroll or get lost. I think that we can start off with Mike Rice's question. He asked if there are planned to be enforced or advisory down selects.
And I did touch on that one just a little bit, but I can elaborate on that a little more. Things like, there are some down selects that we're looking to possibly be enforced, but they would be things that are clear delineators of fair opportunity. OCONUS. We may just stand up an OCONUS-based domain. That is, do you have experience working overseas, and where do you have that experience? As well as potentially, the cost type contracting experience and capabilities and systems, things that are very cut and dry, and things less reliant on, did I just happen to update my profile this week, sort of thing. We want to avoid those sorts of issues. And so we are considering how to kind of train customers as well on knowing what in the system is a wise sort of task order level qualification, but also using that data historically to help inform better buying in the future. Hey, I see you're trying to buy this particular service and you're putting on a certification that almost no industry has, and industry has kind of flagged as maybe not being a good indicator of performance or capabilities in this area. Historically, no one's used it. You might want to consider, why are you using this? And we won't have that at the start, but it's something that we could use over time to collect better information on how people buy services. You'll be able to see what kind of strange assumptions customers might be trying to make, but likewise, we can start to help people not necessarily standardize, but at least kind of level set their expectations.
All right. And Kevin, I think gratefully sent you a little bit of a softball. What kind of period of performance do you expect? Knowing that everything is still up in the air and this is in the acquisition strategy phase and we're doing RFIs, do you have any idea?
Yeah, so if we're talking about the lifetime of this contract, we are looking at getting authority to make it a 20-year contract. However, we would do it, you would still have to kind of re-represent and re-rep at the 5-year windows, just as you do with the schedules program. So if your size changed or things like that, we would do it at that 5-year mark. And one of the benefits of that is we have quite a few customers who are trying to come out with 10-year requirements right now, and there's just no capability for that on our MAC program.
And kind of a follow-on to that, you're clearly right on a roll here. Jason Miller's question is, sounds like you're recreating the schedules program with open enrollment in one contract. How will Big Mac be different? I think we've been over this a little bit. You've explained some of the differences, but do you have any additions you want to talk about?
Yeah, and you're right. It has a lot of similarities. We are trying to, it will be a higher standard than schedules to get in. At least that's our intention, is that, you have to have a bit of a better track record to prove, you qualify for a best in class. The other things to consider are, there's capabilities that we can't do on schedules, and we tried to get the authority for it that we know that are needed in the world of services. So that is cost type contracting, non-commercial, as well as that unpriced aspect. Now, you will hear about unpriced market research that's happening to possibly incorporate that on schedules program as well. So I'll give you kind of that early heads up, but we are moving forward with that earlier on this contract. And they're going to be using some of the research that we did to kind of inform their decisions there as well. The other thing is, we do understand that there's, just scope areas that maybe schedules doesn't cover nicely today. And really, we want to set this up in a way that thinks through contracting from purely a services perspective. Schedules isn't designed in a way that has to also accommodate products. And so it has some rules in there that maybe aren't the best for services acquisition. And you can see in the type of data we're trying to collect of how do we define what services are in the future, as well as how do you market research and buy services. So that's the primary difference. But otherwise, you're right. There is a lot of similarities. And really what we want to do is take the best of schedules, take the best of MACs, and bring them into one place.
That's a great explanation, Jill. And I think the next question we talked a little bit about in previous sessions as well, given that there's a modern GUI and an interface for both the government to use as a market research tool, as well as for a company to know where they stand, who is going to manage I lost the question, who's going to maintain the data on contractors?
So as far as how GSA is aligned, and I don't know how, I'm sure you've all been somewhat either, I won't say the victim of it, but at least are somewhat aware of, GSA is divided by categories. I'm here representing the professional services and human capital category, but the categories would continue to manage their individual requirements and industry partners for their domain spaces, even even on this contract. So that's how we're doing it for MAS these days. So if we are, as professional services, the owners of R&D and management advisory, we manage the onboarding, we manage the requirements and those capabilities. However, facilities would be in charge of kind of defining base operation support and continuing to manage those sorts of requirements and vetting and things like that. So it will be a matrixed management internal, but across all of the different services-based offices. And the system right now is owned and maintained by professional services. At least to start, it'll continue to be under us. You will probably see some of the IT GWACs start to be on the Symphony system as well. And then, so we'll have kind of cross requirements. If that morphs into a change control board, that might be what happens. But right now it is being managed and kind of independently I suppose, controlled by professional services at this time.
Thanks, Jill. So the next question has to do with timeline. So I tried to help by putting up your timeline slide here. Mike asks, how will the initial IDIQ be awarded, and how soon after the initial award will you move into open enrollment? So I think he's thinking about the phased enrollment. How are we going to handle it?
Yeah, and that's a good question because right now we are considering that we will have to have an initial close, at least for the first on-ramping, just to give us some time to kind of work through the different proposals and things like that. So the solicitation, assuming that, kind of we get all of the thumbs up and things like that, should come out early FY22. And then we'll have it open for several months for people to, review it, build their proposals, and submit it to the system. And then we may close it for the final few months of the fiscal year while we actually run through and validate and verify all of the things that have been submitted so that we can put it live in FY23. And then we will probably give it a month or two of being live, make sure that we didn't have any kind of major issues before we open it back up. So I wouldn't anticipate at a max, there would be a 6-month gap between kind of when we closed the doors and opened it back up for the very first run. But after that, it would never be that long again. We're just thinking that we're going to get a lot at the get-go. And so we kind of have to think that through. But ideally, if we can make it as like a 3-month kind of window, that would be something we'd be shooting for. But that is a little TBD. That's just kind of those early thoughts on how we would manage it. And then again, it may become continuously open after that.
That's great, Jill. I'm not trying to talk a little to give you a chance to breathe and take a sip of water if you need. Thank you for all your answers today. So Chip Taylor has asked, OASIS established minimum thresholds in each pool to essentially identify the most qualified or capable industry partners for each pool. How will this new MAC differentiate performance levels so that customers have access to the best partners?
So it is the piece that's going to come out in that second RFI for more input. We aren't setting any minimums at the moment, not until we have a better idea of the capabilities of industry within some of those scope areas in the future. So we are going to do it a little bit of a mix. We're going to ask for kind of the capability input from industry. We're going to sort of average it out, get a sense of what the different industry partners can do. And what is that level, but what is that level that also makes it feasible for small business to participate as well, and kind of considerations for that. Each of the domains will have different thresholds. And again, it's going to be part of letting the industry capabilities influence it, and then turning around and asking customers about, does this meet your expectations? Does this define quality for you? Is there anything we missed? And what else should we consider? So it'll be quite a bit of back and forth, but I don't have, as far as kind of how it's different from maybe OASIS today, I will say it probably won't be as high of standards as you're used to as OASIS today. That being said, we're considering that certain domains might have fairly high standards based on the type of work or the scope of work that it covers. So you just won't see it kind of that same across the board feel that you might have, depending on if you're a small business, you might have felt when you looked at the OASIS solicitation.
A real tailored and common sense approach, I think. So that's a great answer. The next question is, can you better define the large and small business play across the IDIQ? And I think you answered this, that there's not going to be too much of a differentiation, but there's a similar question down below about, can you also go into recertification or certifications at the time of award versus maybe later on? I think we talked about this in the past too.
Yeah, and I realized after I finished that I didn't cover probably a very important topic on that small business front, which is when this contract is combined, what does that look like for small businesses, their ability to compete, and the level of small business participation in the contract. We are looking at implementing reserves. So this too would operate very similar to schedules in that customer agencies could do small business set-asides against a reserves pool. There's a very specific reason for doing that, and that's that small business regulations have changed. And then if we continue to manage the contracts like we have OASIS today as large and small, every time that someone ordered off of the generic small contract, every small industry partner would have to recertify their size at the task order level. And so to prevent that and make it so that your small business size standard lasts for the 5-year contract term, we're going to implement reserves, because that locks in your small business size standard for that 5-year term by your socioeconomic category. So we would map it to the socioeconomic categories that set-asides are valid for. And then we would want to make sure that there's adequate participation from each of those socioeconomic groups within the domains. We're not anticipating doing different kind of standards at the moment. That's one of the things that we're looking through. Again, how can we kind of differentiate small, large, but make sure that we have the right participation and coverage for customer interests and things like that. So I don't have a good answer for that. You have the chance to comment on that a little bit though. But otherwise, that's mostly going to come out again during the second RFI. However, again, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and then to further elaborate on Mark's scenario, so if a small business is a, SDVOSB at the time of award, but is later certified as a hub zone, they could update theirs, but they'd have to recertify that their SDVOSB is still active, right? So anytime you'd want to add, you'd have to recertify.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you're trying to add hub zone, you would have to recertify your existing one. So you want to keep that in mind, kind of what is your tactical decision there, in case you maybe did size out of a different socioeconomic category. And same thing, obviously, if, in the case of you were bought out for a company or things like that, you'd have to do the same recertification for mergers and things of that nature. But otherwise, it is at the time of your award that your 5-year window would begin. And then again, at that 5 years, if you still have that small business standard, then you maintain it moving forward.
Whiskey's also interested in answering. I love it.
I'm surprised you can hear all the way down.
It's all part of having all this time taking away from him. That's perfectly acceptable. We have a couple questions here, some of them just to me and some of them to the group in the chat, but a lot of these are about the difference between firm fixed price and T&M or labor hour contracts. The first one is whether or not you're considering allowing companies to choose whether to opt into one or the other if they don't have an approved accounting system.
Yes, so we're not going to make it a requirement that you have cost accounting and that you be able to participate on that side of the contract. So I don't worry about that kind of being a hard requirement. that also is why we kind of go back to that situation of what might be an enforceable down select. But that's a good idea, the good thought of, you know, just voluntarily opting out, as opposed to you really the task order requirements and the certificate kind of capabilities would speak for themselves in most situations in a domain, and customers would be able to see that. And you'd also, you know, if things changed and you suddenly had those capabilities, you could update your profile and show us that, you know, you did get your approved accounting system, or you have now had experience managing that type of contract outside of the contract, or however it might have come about.
And Kevin, we already answered, do you want to follow up on your question about, do you imagine being able to award T&M and for a fixed price as a small business and then adding more later?
I think that was just answered. Yeah. So the idea is you could graduate, you know, a small business could start off with easier contract types, and then as they develop capability, ask to be included in those kind of fair opportunities.
Absolutely. Yep. That would be our intention. And similarly, like, you know, small businesses would, the data that we're collecting and the data that, you know, customers are putting in, what are they looking for? What type of filters are they applying? Just as we don't want what you give us to be a black hole that customers can't see, we don't anticipate seeing what customers are asking for being a black hole for you. So we'll have to think through what dashboards might look like, and also like presentations of trends. But we could show all of the different industry, you know, this is what people are looking for. This is what people have been searching on and trying to buy. And small businesses can more easily see where they might have gaps, where they didn't know they had gaps. So collecting all of this level of data isn't just a benefit to the customers. It can really be a benefit for all of you as well. And also a benefit when you're looking at potential subcontractors, or, you know, where, you know, maybe that requirement, you're 80% of the way there and you want to go find that subcontractor that has 20% that you're missing. You have that same type of visibility. There would be some things that would probably make federal login required, namely facility clearance information and things like that. And we'll ask for feedback on that more at a later date once we actually have kind of a blueprint of what we'd be collecting. But otherwise, some kind of just considerations for what might motivate you to contribute to your profile.
Well, I think the central database idea can only be helpful and used, hopefully, for good and not evil. It kind of goes along with Mike's next question here. It seems like you're giving CEOs a lot of levers to limit competition. Is there a risk in doing that? And I kind of see it as the opposite, right? You're giving them the capability to really do market research as to what's out there and what kinds of requirements could be bid. But do you have any other comments about that?
I will admit, like, you're obviously not the first to say, you know, will they figure out how many levers they can pull in order to only get the one business that they're looking for. The data won't only be available to you, it'll be available to their small business offices. So part of it is to, yes, have better visibility, make it more clear that, hey, you didn't think small business could do this, but absolutely they can. Just look at the data to support it. But we'll have track records of COs, activities, and potentially sort of prohibitive behavior. We won't be able to enforce any of that, but we talk to their HCAs every year. We talk to their small businesses offices regularly, and their decision makers kind of saw what we're doing, and they're like, are we going to get a report of their activity, of kind of what they're doing, how they're selecting? And we're like, absolutely. You're going to get to see it. You're going to get to see, you know, what does the small business profile really look like for the type of things that you all buy. So there is the risk that they might pull too many levers to artificially limit competition to begin. And we know that that's a prohibitive practice, but you all have visibility into that as well. And we also know CEOs don't like protests. So yeah, you might have a little more data to say, you didn't need these 10 things for this type of requirement, or whatever it might be. So it'll be a balancing system that we hope, again, that level of data can help both sides for in the long run.
Transparency, I think, will help. I'm with you. I stand on the good side. I think we've run out of questions in the chat. I wanted to say thank you again so much for all the time and information that you've given. I'm sure everyone is running to their respective sources to pull the RFI and respond, which is a great response. And if you have any more questions or comments, who should they reach out to, Jill?
Yeah, so we are now at the point where we'd like to kind of pull things into our consolidated inbox, which is PSHC dev, DEV at gsa.gov. If we can, if a question can be answered right away, we will. Otherwise, we'll let you know that we're consolidating kind of general industry questions at this point, and we're going to be regularly updating a Q&A document. And you'll probably see answers on that Q&A even prior to the close if we think it's something that would help people understand the RFI better or things like that. So yeah, thank you, everyone. I will make sure. Perfect. Yep, that is it.
And the other question that we got a couple times is, will the slides be emailed? I think we normally email to the acquisition COI and the registrants, and I believe we will also post to our ACT-IAC site. So there's a couple different ways you can get the slides. Jill, we're fixing your one table, and everyone should be able to get these as a supplement to the RFI.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you all for your time and your questions. And then, like I said, you'll be seeing constant updates from us moving forward. So follow that professional services interact page, and then PSHC Dev for all your questions. And there will be a Q&A document coming out that regularly updates folks. So thank you. And I'm sorry that my cat's not running across the screen to also say goodbye.
I know. Say goodbye to Whiskey Forest. Thank you, Jill.
Have a wonderful day.